Sophia OSFOUR and welcome to my masterclass on healing wounds with the OSFOUR Self Coaching Model. For thousands of years, both philosophers and scientists have tried to answer one question, which is, what is the purpose of life? In fact, each and every one of us have at least wondered about it once in our life. One thing is for sure is that whatever is the purpose of life, it has at its purest essence something to do with the fact of experiencing different roles, situations, emotions, and of course, learning from them. When experiences are beautiful and positive, they quickly turn into wonderful memories that we cherish for the rest of our lives, but are also nourish the deepest core of our souls. However, on the other hand, when we go through a horrible, negative, painful experiences, how are we supposed to deal with them? Because there is no doubt that experiences like this just don't heal and disappear by themselves, nor should we be deluded enough to even think for 1 second that the weight they carry will not take a toll on us as the year passes. Therefore, committing to heal them is not only a common sense, but is often the only way to truly overcome them. The OSFOUR Self Coaching Model was precisely designed to help you and support you to heal the difficult experiences that you had to go through in your life. In fact, let's give you a quick introduction about what is the OSFOUR Self Coaching Model. Are you ready? Let's do this!
Hello everyone, this is Sophia OSFOUR and welcome on my masterclass on healing wounds with the OSFOUR Self Coaching Model. Before we start, let's first understand what is a model. In psychology, a model is referred as a theory or process that is either created to understand a mechanism or to solve a precise problem, such as the work of BYRON-KATIE, which is made out of 4 powerful questions that helps you change your belief system. The next question you're probably wondering about is what is the OSFOUR Self Coaching Model then? The OSFOUR Self Coaching Model is a process, a set of habits and principles, and a tool. But the best way to describe it would be to simply say that it is a daily practice. As a process, it is designed to transform negative experiences into powerful life lessons and help you heal them. As a set of habits and principles, it teaches you how you can recycle your negative experiences to drastically increase your self-awareness and enhance the quality of your communication, as well as using those experiences as a springboard for you to learn, grow, and evolve. As a tool, it provides you with a powerful set of principles that, and when combined with the sets of habits and the process itself, becomes a very sophisticated tool that ultimately allows you to self-coach yourself on the spot in order to manage and face the daily challenges of your life in a more efficient, powerful, and peaceful way. Now, I know what you're going to say to me. Sophia, that all sounds very important and interesting, but what do you mean exactly? Let me break it down to you. You know how sometimes you're going through a very difficult situation and the only question you have in your head over and over is, why me? And don't you agree that negative experiences can be sometimes so challenging that it feels as though you're dragging them years and years after you've experienced them? Well, what you probably don't know is that the reason you drag them is because you have not been able to process them properly, digest them, forgive them, and ultimately learn the lesson they had to teach you. Oh yes, because I forgot to tell you, but all the bad experiences that you're going through in your life, well, they're not just there to hurt you, but in fact to teach you a very important lesson you need to learn in order to grow. And spoiler alert, guys, but that is one of the purpose of life. I'm just saying. So, in other words, the better you get at digesting those experiences and of course learning from them, the easier your life is going to be. So I'm guessing that at this point, your next question is, what would I really benefit from learning the OSFOUR Self Coaching Model? Okay, that is a fair question. But before I tell you that, let me first say this. One of the most disturbing assumptions that is made in our society, and that I personally always thought to be not only strange, but also seriously disempowering, is the fact that people take for granted that because you are a human being from day one, that obviously means that you know and understand everything that is happening inside your inner world. which is simply not true. The reality is that most of us operate at a basic and reactive level because we are on autopilot mode, unconscious of what is really happening into our inner world. We react and respond to outside stimuli without having a clear understanding of why we feel or act the way we do, simply because we have never been taught how to inquire about it. But moreover, because even if we knew about it, what are we supposed to do with it? So the benefit of learning the OSFOUR Self Coaching Model is that it gives you the knowledge, tools, and skills you need to be mindful of yourself, where you can anticipate, understand, and control what is happening into your inner world. But more importantly, deal with it. The model is designed to provide you with a clear and simple process and give you the tools to self-coach yourself in order to operate in a more efficient way at 3 constant levels that most people struggle with in their daily life, which is what you experience, how you experienced it, and how you respond to it. In this masterclass, I'm teaching you the basic of the OSFOUR Self-Coaching Model through study cases of famous people. Together, we are going to analyze what are the negative experiences they faced and how they could digest, learn, and heal them if they had the OSFOUR Self-Coaching Model. The model is made out of 3 layers. The process, which is the 4 different steps that the model is made of. The postures, which is the attitude that you will need to develop to go through the process. And finally, the postulas, which are, if you will, the rules that structure the model. Here in this masterclass, you will be taught the process and the postures. And if you're interested to work with me on one-to-one and learn the whole OSFOUR Self-Coaching Model, go on my website to see my coaching package, or contact me directly via my email address to book your 30 minutes free discovery session. You'll find both the link below this video. Finally, keep in mind that although the OSFOUR Self-Coaching Model is a very powerful tool, it is not designed to work on traumatic experiences or for people with mental issues. For those things, we advise you to seek other type of support.
Since the journey of humanity has started, relationships have always been the one experiences in the life of human being most capable to bring tremendous joy, but also tremendous pain. Yet the need to love and to be loved is so important that most of us are more than happy to risk everything again and again, just in the hope to experience that perfect harmony. And if we agree that life is a school and that each experiences that we face have a specific lesson to teach us, then there are no area in our lives that will challenge us the way a relationship will. Especially because one of the laws of the universe is that whoever you attract in your life is a direct reflection of yourself. And as the famous French writer Blaise Pascal said, the heart knows no reason. So there are no doubt that relationships are very complicated on their own. But what are you supposed to learn when your relationship and your marriage is hijacked by the national interest of an entire country? And that the one person that you loved faithfully and served for more than 20 years and therefore trusted suddenly turn on you. And before you know it, you lose everything. That is the story of Catherine of Aragon.
In 1533, at the age of 47 years old, Catherine of Aragon marriage is annulled after 6 years of a battle with Henry VIII, her husband, and the King of England. Although she has been a faithful wife for 23 years and even considered by many historians as the only woman Henry truly loved, as well as the fact that she was even considered by Henry himself as being the perfect wife. Yet Henry will spare her no humiliation in his obsession to get a male heir. Upon the annulment of her marriage with the king, under the argument that her marriage to her brother was consummated, Catherine of Aragon, Queen of England and the mother of the sole heir, would literally from one day to the next lose everything. Her status, her titles, her husband, and even her daughter. She will die as a princess 3 years later on the 7th January 1536, completely banished from the court, an outcast, and quite frankly, a broken woman. Her enemy, Anne Boleyn, will die only 4 months later, In this video, we are going to explore how could Catherine learn and heal from this very difficult situation and therefore turn this very painful experience into pure wisdom if she was taught how to use the OSFOUR Self Coaching. As you already know, the second layer that this model is made of are 5 postures that you will need to develop in order to start this healing journey. But first of all, let's understand what is a posture. A posture is a particular approach or attitude that allows one to tackle a situation in the most efficient way possible. The key on developing those postures is to practice them on a daily basis. You will also see that one of the benefits of the OSFOUR Self Coaching model is that the very nature of those 5 postures will tremendously enhance the quality of your communication. Those 5 postures are benevolence towards yourself and others, empathy, compassion, active listening, and the coach posture. Now, let's take a moment to understand each of those postures and how to apply them on your daily life. What is benevolence? Benevolence is the ability to be kind and gentle in the way you approach yourself and others. Having benevolence towards yourself and others is the keystone of any kind of self-work, especially when you are stepping into a healing process. However, it must be practiced every day. How can you practice it on a daily basis? Abolish once and for all negative and unproductive self-criticism, self-depreciation, self-sabotage behavior, and any kind of judgment. Instead, practice welcoming yourself and others as they are, and loving, caring, appreciating yourself unconditionally. What is empathy? Empathy is the ability to sense other people's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. To develop that tool will help you to have a wider understanding of a situation because you're not just stuck into your point of view. The best way to practice empathy is by asking yourself why people do what they do. Try to understand their motivations, their goals, and therefore their point of view without any judgment on your part. What is compassion? Compassion literally means to suffer together. Among emotion researchers, it is defined as the feeling that arises when you are confronted with another's suffering or feel motivated to relieve that suffering. How can you practice it on a daily basis? Since compassion is the ability to recognize a problem and act upon it, the number one act of compassion must be for yourself, which means that you must practice not doing necessarily what is easy, but what is right for you to do. What will benefit you in the long run instead of allowing yourself to be trapped into impulsive behaviors? Other act of compassion can simply be to help a perfect stranger. What is active listening? Active listening is a communication skills that involves going beyond simply listening to the words that another person speaks, but also seeking to understand the meaning and intent behind them. It requires being an active participant in the communication process, but moreover, absolute presence in the moment. How can you practice it on a daily basis? Most people are capable to listen, yet it takes an incredible level of self-discipline to hear people. So, in order to practice it, listen people without judging, without allowing your own perception, beliefs, and projection to get involved into the conversation, but instead silence yourself to the point where you can welcome what they are saying and therefore hear and understand what they want to express or what they need to express. What is a coach posture? The posture of a coach is of one where you ask yourself powerful, open questions that allows you to get in touch with the core of how you feel or what do you think. How can you practice it on a daily basis? Here are a couple of powerful open questions. How do I feel? What makes me feel that way? What has triggered this emotion in me? How can I change those feelings? What is important for me in this situation? What can I learn from this situation?
So before we start, guys, I just want to remind you that you have a free worksheet that allows you to follow the process that I'm about to teach you. You can find it on the link below this video. Also, I would like to underline the fact that the OSFOUR self-coaching model can be used for different types of experiences, but for the moment we will exclusively focus on relationship. On the first part of the model, the skills that you want and that you will develop is to understand how your brain organizes the experience that you want to work on. Because believe it or not, but what really hurts about an experience is not the experience itself, but in fact the way it is set up in your head. And although you can't change an experience, you can definitely change how it is organized in your brain. The structure that the model invites you to follow is similar to a domino effect, because every time you are faced with an experience, your brain triggers a perception of that situation, and that perception is basically the point of view in which your brain chooses to see this situation. Now, that perception will trigger a set of thoughts. Those thoughts will trigger a set of emotions. Those emotions will trigger a belief, and those beliefs are basically the conclusion that you make about the cause, the meaning, or the limitation that this experience is teaching you. Let me just stop my notes for a second. Finally, all of this will trigger a behavior, which can be translated by a reply. And you have two types of reply. You have what I call a strategic reply or an automated reply. An automated reply is obviously the complete opposite of a strategic reply. It is a defense mechanism that is incapable to take into consideration the subtlety or complexity of a situation in order to offer a reply that is adequate to the experience that you're facing. What the OSFOUR self-coaching model is helping you to do is to make this unconscious structure conscious. And the more conscious you are about it, the more you can take control of it instead of being controlled by it. So let's find out what could have been the perception of Catherine of Aragon. Let me stop my notes. But before I start, let's all remember, guys, that neither me or you are here to judge or criticize what someone has done. We are here as observers of life and people, nothing else. Now, in the case of Catherine of Aragon, my observations have led me to believe that potentially her viewpoint of the whole situation was of someone who suddenly lost her sense of value as a person, but more importantly, as a woman. In other words, she unconsciously measured her value as a person based on the status as a princess, queen, wife of a king, mother of an heir, and finally the fact that once upon a time she was considered the most beautiful and accomplished woman of her time, and that all of a sudden all of that was taken from her. Let me stop my note for a second. And that is always a problem when your value is depending on outside element, because when and if you lose them, suddenly it is your entire sense of identity that is under attack. And in fact, her response to this whole situation is of someone who feels attacks. Now, what led me to that conclusion is the situation itself, but more importantly, her reply to the whole experience, and the fact that when this whole thing happened, she just turned 41 years old. Her husband was 5 years younger than her, and he wanted to divorce her for a woman that was 10 years younger than her at least, which is a situation that any woman can relate to. Now, that alone could have probably been a tremendous source of pain. Because for centuries now, women have been praised and valued for their youth, the beauty, and the ability to bear children. There's also the fact that she lived in a time where people give a lot of importance to their status, their titles, the family they come from, and so on, and even today, to be really honest. In her case, divorcing meant that she would have lost all her status all at once. In regard to her thoughts, let me stop my notes. That could have been something like, I'm being thrown away, I'm disgraced, I'm dishonored, not good enough, I have lost my value. So for the thought I'm being thrown away, what led me to that conclusion is the fact that she turned 41 years old and it became clear that she was reaching the age where she would not be able to have children anymore, at least in this time. For the thought I'm being disgraced or dishonored, what led me to that conclusion is the fact that the argument that Henry made for the divorce was that her marriage to her brother was consumed, and in other words, she was not virgin on the wedding night. And she was even questioning to detail about it in the court, which was probably extremely humiliating for a woman as religious as she was. For the thought, I'm not good enough, what led me to that thought is the fact that one of her duty as a queen, and in fact as a woman, was to provide the crown with the male heir. And she probably carried a big sense of failure, especially because now she was supposed to be replaced by a woman who was apparently at least, offering or telling, to Henry VIII that she'll be successful at that. Now, obviously, Anne Boleyn would learn at her own expense that things are not that simple. As for the thought, I have lost my value, it is her reply to the whole situation that has led me to that conclusion, because in her case, her reply was absolutely an automated reply. In regard to her emotion, I think it's not really difficult to guess: sadness, deep despair, anger, resentment, and probably even depression. And talking about emotion, one of the facts that I always found extremely fascinating about her, is that at the time of her death, there was a lot of rumor that she might have been poisoned, because when the embalmers opened up her body, they found out that her heart was black. And in fact, that problem caused a lot of prejudice to Anne Boleyn, because people would assume that she might have ordered her poisoning. However, most likely scientists believe today that she just had cancer. Yet I'm a strong believer that when we cannot express our pain, sometimes our body will express it through pain or disease. And what a metaphor, I mean, an angry broken heart that turns black. I mean, I think that it's interesting, to say the least. In regard to her belief, I think it could have been something like, this has happened because I'm getting older, because I was not able to produce a male heir. This means that I'm not good enough. This means that you can never trust anyone. This has happened because my husband was bewitched by this woman. What led me to that conclusion is the situation, is the logic of a perception. And finally, in regard to her behavior, or if you prefer her reply, clearly it is an automated reply. And what led me to that conclusion is the fact that her only reply to this whole situation over a period of 6 years was to be stiff, stubborn, and completely controlled by her emotion. Throughout those 6 years, she refused to negotiate, yet historians agreed that in fact, if she would have accepted to negotiate with Henry, he would have given her anything she wanted, because he was so desperate, and therefore she could avoid lots of pain and humiliation for herself, but more importantly, for her daughter. For instance, Anne of Cleves, who was the fourth wife of Henry VIII, and who was considered by Henry himself too ugly. He didn't want to stay married with her. He divorced her, and she didn't say nothing. She accepted everything, and by consequence, he compensated her with a huge amount of money and made her one of the richest women in England, And in fact, one of the advantages of the OSFOUR self-coaching is to help you to see the bigger picture in a situation that you're working on. Something that could have been really useful for Catherine. Now, I want to give you a couple of tips. When you're starting using the OSFOUR self-coaching model, journaling, this structure can be very, very powerful. Because what you want to do, once again, is to make the structure that is unconscious conscious, and the more conscious you are of it, the more empowered you are. Finally, I want to also say this: very often when we're experiencing difficult experiences, the feeling that we have is that this experiencing is coming in my life and it's hurting me, right? And so you have the feeling that it is the experience that creates the hurt, but what truly is happening is that the hurt was already there, and the experience is just shedding light to suffering or wound that was already there. So if we take it into the perspective of what I just said about Catherine, is that her sense of value was probably already wounded. And that's probably one of the most basic, oldest wound that all of us as a human being experience. which is the fact that we all feel as though that we have to be, do, or have certain things in order for us to be valued. And that if we're missing one of those things, it's like, normally I should be 100%, but I'm not, because I'm not doing this, I don't have this, or I'm not that, right? And that is one of the oldest wounds that we all carry. So in her case, you know, it feels as though this situation created this pain, but what really happened is that the pain was, the situation only shed light to a pain that was already there. And so that is why the situation, the difficult situation that you are facing, whenever they awake a pain and a suffering and a wound inside of you, it is a way, the way that life uses to guide you into the things that you need to work on. On the second part of this model, what you want to clarify is what is the core wound that this situation is touching? What is the behavior or defense mechanism that is being triggered? And finally, how those two elements have participated to construct the experience the way it was. This is a part that can be very confronting, but it's also the part where you can gather the biggest amount of information about yourself, life, and others. Without that, there's no learning, and there are no change that can be possible. However, this is a part that most people prefer to avoid because it makes them feel uncomfortable about themselves. Yet I will never emphasize it enough. This part is key into the healing process. Embrace it. The structure that the model invites you to follow is made out of 5 steps, each of them designed to help you discover what are the things that you did or that you didn't do that made the situation the way it became. Your shadow is the part of you that you suppress because you don't like it or because it is not accepted by your environment. Yet the more comfortable you will be about facing it, confronting it, accepting it, and embracing it, the more you will be able to recycle your negative experiences into tools for you to grow and evolve in your life. Distinguishment is your ability to tell the difference between what belongs to you, such as your thoughts, your emotions, your perceptions, your projections, your behaviors, and of course your belief, and what belong to the other person. Because believe it or not, but very often in life people will try to make you responsible for stuff that belongs to them, as well as you might be tempted to do the same. And that is why it is so important for you to learn to tell the difference between those two. Your quality of answer. It is your ability to assess what was your reply to this whole situation. Was it an automated reply or a strategic reply? It is a skill that is very important if you want to be able to increase your self-awareness. And also because you have to remember at all time, the more negative is your perception of a situation, the less you will have access to resource and your resourcefulness. Your positive attention is the core reason that pushes one to do something, especially when that thing is not necessarily good for you. Because as long as what you are doing is giving you more than what you're losing, no matter how negative it is, on the long run you will keep on doing it. Your pattern are situations or behaviors or people even that reoccur in your life again and again. This is another clue that life is giving you that something needs to be healed. So now let's analyze, the whole situation in regard to Catherine of Aragon. So my observation have led me to believe to believe that her core wound was triggered here was her sense of worth and value, because it was attached and in fact nourished by her status. And when she was threatened to lose them, her behavior or reply, if you prefer, was to become completely stubborn, stiff, and totally hermetic to her emotions or point of view or even needs. What led me to that conclusion, is simply her reply, because you can tell a lot about how someone feels about something just based on the reply they give. Because remember, Anne of Clèves, which was the 4th wife of Henry, had to go through the same situation when she was divorced by Henry. She was said that she was the ugliest, woman that he had ever seen, and he didn't want to stay married with her. And, when we talk about this like in historical fact, we don't actually I'm always trying to feel it as a human being. How would it make me feel if I had to leave a country, come in another country, I don't speak the language, I don't know nobody, I'm getting married to an old guy, because at that time he was quite old. And suddenly, this guy is declaring to everybody in the court that I'm so ugly, he doesn't want to stay with me. And now he's even asking me, to divorce with him. And, I gotta admire this woman. She remained calm, she remained, in control of everything. And her response to this whole thing was to be like, you know what, I don't care. And in the end, she ended up, the richest woman in England, and free because she was not married, which at that time was absolutely incredible for a woman to be rich and free without a husband or a father or stuff like that. And the funny things is that they became very good friends. He kept on inviting her back and forth to the court after that. And that's quite extraordinary. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is because she did not connect her value as a person and as a woman based on her status. So he could do what he wanted. Now, for you, to give you a couple of tips, to use this part of the model, because this is probably the most sophisticated part of the model, I would say. What you're looking for here in your shadow is the core wound and the behavior that goes with it. And in this specific part of the model, your posture is very important. You've seen in this video your 5 postures, okay? You have benevolence, empathy, compassion, active listening, and the coach posture. And when you step into your shadow, your benevolence and your empathy is very important. And I see in this situation usually 2 types of people. You have one type of people who would rather die than ever agree that there are part of them that needs to be worked on, or there are things about them that are not okay. Or you see people who are more than happy to beat themselves up, and go there, yeah, I'm bad, I'm this, and you have to find a balance, because this model is about a balance. If you want to do either of those things, let me tell you this thing, this video and this model is not for you. Stop it and watch something else, okay? But if you're really honest and really genuine about healing yourself, then you have to find a balance. And benevolence is very important when you're stepping into your shadow, because you're going to see and you're going to have to see and learn how to see things about yourself that you don't feel comfortable, that you don't like even. And that is why it's so important to have benevolence and your entire posture. So if you're not sure about your posture, go back to the videos that was just here before this one, and remind yourself about your posture, because you have to be able to be fair to yourself. So now, part that we want to know, okay, is what is it, distinguishment part, is what is it that belongs to Catherine and what is it that belongs to Henry VIII, okay. So in my opinion, obviously her wound of not feeling valued belonged to her, or needing to have titles and stuff like that to feel value belonged to her. And when you are wounded, you are at the service of your wound, okay? And that's the one thing that this model is really teaching us, okay? Which means that you're only serving yourself, and you are not committed to act for the best interest of all the people that are involved in that situation. And in that situation, she was not alone, okay? So in her behavior, which include her stubbornness, also her victim posture and her posture, I'm right and you're wrong. So I want to take a moment and talk about this, because this is very important, okay? All of these 3 things belong to her, okay? So the victim posture is something that is really important to stop for a moment and talk about it. The victim posture, it could be that in time in your life you go through something and someone has wronged you, and in that moment you are a victim. But the victim posture is something else. It is a permanent state of victimhood, okay? And what it does on the short term is that in a way it exempts you from taking responsibility. It's like a visa. Me, I don't have to look at myself because I'm the victim of the story, and you're completely wrong and I'm completely hurt, and therefore this is the story, right? The second point also is her posture, I'm right and you're wrong, which is very much also coming from her victim posture, right? But this is a posture also where you start to put yourself in a higher position and you don't allow the other person to express their feeling. And overall, what it created is really her inability to listen what this guy wanted, right? Because maybe Harry didn't know how to say it, but I think in all honesty, this guy just wanted to have more children, And I think that even in modern days now, there is nothing more painful than a couple who wants to have children and they can't. And for one reason, you are one of the one that can, something is not working and you can't give those children, And it is painful regardless of what situation, because there's nobody to blame. It's just the way it is, right? And I think maybe he didn't know how to express it, but this is when your active listening is coming into handy. But what he was trying to say is, I just want to have more children, right? The second point also is that I think Harry, really felt that sense of, duty of providing the crown with a male heir. This was one of the things that he had to do, right? And he probably felt a lot of pressure about it. And she didn't hear that neither. And finally, in my opinion, he very much connected also his manhood to his ability to produce a male heir. And even in today's life, if you hear guys, oh yeah, can you imagine, I made 3 babies in one go, things like men have or had even more at that time than now, but a tendency to connect to the manhood, to the ability to produce children, right? So in those 3 things, this guy was not wrong. He just didn't know how to express them, but she couldn't hear them. And the reason she couldn't hear that is because she was in a victim posture, and she was in a posture of, I'm right, you're wrong. And in that, I think that belonged to her. And it just made the situation worse, because the less she was listening to him, the more he became aggressive. So what belonged to him really is his violence. It is the fact that he was not only, he was not only mean in the end with her, he was unmerciful. There's a story, that in the end, when he finally managed to divorce Catherine, he sent her in some old castle, but somewhere, far away from the court anyway. And at some point, she writes a letter to him to ask him, to increase the state of her life, because she was in this old castle. And she nicely asked, could you increase the quality of my life, blah, 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 da, da, da. And his response to that demand was to send her in a castle that was 10 times worse than the first one. And in finally she died in that castle, I think in that sense, he was that belonged to him, because I think what he could not see or what he couldn't hear is that this woman loved him. Maybe the way she did things made him angry, but I think it was not coming from a bad place. It was just coming from a place of love. She was just losing a man that she loved. And in that sense, I think that belonged to him, And also the way that afterwards, he just went crazy, crazy, crazy. Here's a sign in life. If there is something you want and you keep on being so stubborn about it, and you keep on finding all those obstacles, maybe you should stop for a moment and think, well, maybe it's not for me, or maybe the method I'm using is not really the method that it's supposed to be. Because how ironic. In the end, his 3rd wife would give him the child that he wanted, the son that he wanted. But how ironic. That child would die at the age of 15 years old. And in the end, it will be a woman that will become the Queen of England. But what's interesting about both of them, right, is that they had basically the exact same reply. Right? And that's how, like I said to you at the beginning, is that ultimately we only a mirror effect, or the people that you attract in your life are only a mirror of you. Because she goes stubborn, he goes stubborn. She goes violent, he goes violent. And it's interesting. her, people may say, why, but she's not violent. She is, because one of the most common form of violence that people are practicing today and forever is not listening. And not listening, not only the words, because sometimes people don't know how to express themselves, but more importantly, not listening what's behind the words. So let's remove all the layers, all the behaviors that maybe are painful or a bit like questionable, and try to listen. And that is, she's not listening, he's not listening, right? And she goes violent, he goes violent. He goes over controlling, she goes over controlling. And then this is when the situation just got worse between those two. Tips for you for using this model on the distinguishment part. At first, distinguishing a situation, what belongs to me, what belongs to the other person, can be very difficult, especially when you're emotionally attached to the situation. So a very simple exercise that you can do is just that, try to use it on other people. Listen, it's so much easier to see what other people are doing wrong than what we're doing wrong. And that's the whole purpose of this video, because it's going to be much easier for you to connect to what she did wrong than it will be for you, right? But through practicing this with your friends, with your family, and try to be fair, stay in the middle, stay benevolent, remind yourself of your posture, benevolence, empathy, compassion, active listening, and your coaching posture, and ask yourself, why is this person doing this? Why is this person doing that? What is it exactly they're trying? And this is when you develop your tools, and until the moment you will be able to do that, even though you are emotionally involved in a situation, which is the hardest things to do, right? It's to be fair to someone, that you loved and that maybe you feel has hurt you, and to be able to say, yeah, they've done this and this and that, but I've done this and this and that. And the reason they've done this and this and that is because I've done. So in the end, it's 50-50. And that, my friend, is power. So let's analyze the quality of her answer, okay? So in the case of Catherine, obviously, both of them had a automated reply. This whole situation for both of them is exactly the same. They get trapped into the defense mechanism, and like I said, they have exactly the same. Both of them, when they feel threatened, out of control, they go onto stubborn mode, violence, over controlling, both of them, see? And that's very interesting. Now, using a small tips for you for this part, which is the quality of your answer. What is a defense mechanism? When someone is facing a situation, usually when you're a kid, that is stressful. Let me give you an example. Let's imagine that mommy and daddy are arguing, and I'm 3 years old, I've got no clue what's going on, and it's stressful for me. Your nervous system feels threatened, feels stressed out, and don't know how to deal with that, because this can be so destructive that you can, as you know, reach obesity. And people who have this kind of problem is simply a defense mechanism that went so far away that now every time there's anything, your brain goes into this defense mechanism. And it is important for you to know when you are applying from a defense mechanism or you're providing a sophisticated reply. And you can only do that if you're conscious of the structure that this model is teaching you. Now, let's analyze her positive attention. Why is it that she did what she did? Like I already said, this woman was simply a woman in love. That's it. So the reason she went stubborn, the reason she went all these things is that she was in love with this man and she didn't want to give him up. Who can blame her for that? And I think that he could have found a lot of mercifulness if he would have connected to her positive attention. The second thing is that I think she was generally trying to protect her husband, because you got to remember that this woman has grew up in a court. Her parents were this famous kings, and she, has been his wife for 20 years. And she's seen that Harry was not the kind of king that was handy when it comes down to dealing with the problems of the court. He was more than happy to leave the keys of the kingdom and go and do hunting or have fun. And she probably seen over the years that people would take advantage of that. And I think that she saw that Anne Boleyn was someone who was just another person who was there to take advantage of him, and try to take some sort of control over him, which she did, you know. And I think also that another thing is that she was trying to protect the kingdom, you know, because she was thinking, my God, you know, she was a very religious person. So, you know, when he wanted to divorce and do, you know, leave the church, can you imagine? I think for her it was probably like hell, you know, and she was trying to protect his soul or something like that, you know. And also I think the last thing but not least, she was trying to also protect the interest of her child, because by divorcing she'll have to be, you know, to give up her title as a future queen, you know, and I think she was trying to protect that. On the other hand, you know, his positive attention was obviously, he was trying to accomplish his duty as a man, you know, that's it, as a king and as a man, but mostly as a man, as a king, sorry. And he was trying to do what he thought was best for his country, in the sense that he was, you know, the Tudor dynasty was a very young dynasty, was kind of weak, and the only way for this dynasty to carry on was to have a male heir, that's it. So he was just trying, I think, to do what was right, what he thought was right, and you can never blame people for that. So another tip for you using this model, you will understand that trying to understand why is it that people do the things they do, trying to find a positive attention into why people do the things they do is very powerful. And once again, you know, it will increase your empathy. And for that, you can only do that by having benevolence and empathy. So the way you practice that is, once again, look around you, you know, with your colleagues, with your friends, with your family. You know, when they have an argument, try to be this person who is outside of the situation and who is trying to find out, what is the positive attention? What is it they're actually trying to do? What is it they're trying to feed? Or what is it they're trying to heal also, okay? Now, analyze the patterns. Obviously, in this situation, I have very little information, so I can't tell you what could have been the patterns that Catherine of Aragon had. But one thing it tells me is that this was probably not someone who had faced a lot of hardship in her life. So it's very difficult for her to have a more sophisticated reply, because that was probably the first time something challenging at that level happened to her. And so it's difficult to give you any kind of pattern. But for you who is using the model, you know, patterns are basically situation that keeps on happening, or people that keeps on happening, coming in your life. And obviously we're talking about toxic people, toxic situation. And if it keeps on reoccurring, you know that this is a sign from life that something needs to be healed, something needs to be worked on here, okay? And also very important, you know, as you're using the model, the best thing to do, as I have already said, is try to use it on other people at the beginning and try to analyze and understand how the model works, and then slowly start using onto you. On the third part of this model, what you're doing is gathering all the precious information that you have found during this process. It is a key moment into the recycling and transforming of the experience that you want to work on. The holy grail of this whole process is the moment where you're going, wow, because you just had a realization. A realization is a lesson, and a lesson is what makes an experience move from useless to now useful. Yet a lesson will remain useless until you make sure that whatever you have learned, you embody in your life, your behavior, and who you are as a person. However, you need to have a clear plan on how you will behave the next time something like this will appear in your life, which means you need to have a proper goal setting. The structure that the model invites you to follow here is divided in 9 steps, who are divided in 2 parts. The first one, realization, lesson, and change. And the second is a goal setting, which is made out of 5 coaching questions. What, why, how, inconvenient, and engagement. Because remember, a lesson is useless unless you make sure you embody what you have learned. And for that, you need a clear plan. However, for this video, I will only talk about the first part. Let me read my note. The first part, but not the goal setting, because this is something rather basic and you will find it on your worksheet. Remember, you have a free worksheet, you just have to download it here. So, realization. What is a realization? Realization is the coming of a deep and profound understanding of something about yourself, life, or other people. A lesson is something that instructs you or teaches you something about the experience that you are working on. In this process, a lesson is really important element because it is the one factor that makes the difference between a useless random experience that happened to me to a powerful, useful experience that I have attracted in my life to heal. A change. Well, in order to make an impactful change in your life, you need to be clear about what you don't want, but moreover, about what you want to replace it with. So, in the case of, Catherine, obviously, it's hard for me to tell you what could have been her realization, obviously. But for the sake of this video, what I'm going to do is I will tell you what could have been good for her to realize. And I think that, as I said at the beginning of this video, one of the oldest, most basic wounds that you find in all human beings is the fact that we feel that in order for us to be valued, we have to be, do, or have certain things. As if, we were not 100%. Our value is never 100%, and in order for you to have 100%, you'll have to be, do, or have certain things. But that's never possible. Because your value is absolute, is total, is complete from the moment you were born until your last breath, regardless of what you do. Regardless, you could be, going, and inventing, a machine that can heal people from any kind of disease, and your value will still be 100%. Or you can be someone who decides to sit on a chair and do nothing for the rest of your life, and yet your value will still be 100%, because your value, or our value as a human being, is complete, is total, and is absolute. If there would be any realization that would have been amazing for Catherine to understand, is that her value as a woman was completely free from any titles, from any behaviors that this man decided to have. If he wanted to divorce her, divorce her. At the end of the day, she'd done her best, She'd given him 6 children. It just didn't work out, She didn't fail. She just done her best and it didn't work out. And I think this would have been an amazing lesson for her to learn. So one thing would be for her to learn that her sense of value is based on her. And I think that she was an amazing, extraordinary woman. She was praised for a long time before this situation. Why would all of a sudden a simple piece of paper would just make that disappear? It doesn't make any sense, right? I think that it would be extraordinary for her, and I would have wished to see that this woman, rebuilding herself from scratch, and starting a new life for herself, Overall, this is not only for Catherine, but for all of us. Your value is total, absolute, and complete. So for the tips, in this part of the model, what you're consciously looking for is the growth, my friend. You are making a conscious decision to use this experience to transcend a wound and to grow from it, right? And that is not going to fall off from the sky. It comes from a decision that only you can make. On the last part of this model, you basically set yourself free and close the door with everything that has happened and everyone involved in what happened. This is the part where you let go all of the emotion that you have experienced through this situation. Now, one could have the illusion that because this is the final part of this model, therefore it is the easiest part. Well, make no mistake, this is the most difficult part of this whole model, and it is also the most important one. First of all, let's make one point very clear. If someone has hurt you bad enough, acceptance and forgiveness are not natural places where you want to go in. But it is where you and you alone is confronted to a choice, which is to let go and forgive or to hold on to the grudge. And that, my friend, is the ultimate choice. But moreover, it is the pure product of a strategic reply. However, the reason you do it is because otherwise you will be the one who carry the negative feelings that are connected to this experience. And remember, anger, resentment, and any kind of negative emotion are like a heavy invisible bag that you carry everywhere you go. But also, and that is a big one for me, is that whatever wound you have that is not healed, you pass it on through the next generation through your beliefs and your behaviors. The structure that the model invites you to follow is made out of 3 steps. Acceptance, which is in psychology the fact that a person assents to a reality of a situation, recognizing a process or condition, often a negative or uncomfortable situation, without attempting to change it or to protest it. Forgiveness, which is the process that one intentionally and voluntarily goes through in regard to a situation where he initially felt victimized or wronged in order to change his feeling and attitude regarding a given offender and overcome the impact to that offense, including negative emotions such as resentment, anger, or desire for vengeance, however justified it might be. And finally, the closure letter. And for the sake of this video, guys, I will not speak about the closure letter as it is a very intimate and yet basic exercise that you can find on your worksheet. Like I have already said in this video, not every negative experiences that you're going through will impact you the same way. In fact, you and I have experienced lots of negative experiences, but somehow we went through with it, we dealt with it, and we moved on from it without even looking back at it. And the reason for that is because some experiences touch wounds inside of us, while others, well, they don't touch nothing. But what you don't realize is that you went through the same process as the OSFOUR Self Coaching Model invites you to follow. You did it in an unconscious way. Now, for those experiences that are so hurtful to us, it is because something in us is not accepting something in the experience. In other words, non-acceptance is resistance to what is, and the reason we do this is because there is something in what happened or in the way that it happened that doesn't correspond our blueprint, or that was just not okay with us. And our blueprint is basically expectation that you have about how things or people or life should be. Non-acceptance of what is one of the greatest source of suffering for human beings, and usually it expresses itself through a very simple question: why me, or what if? Your experience is there, and that's a typical clue of resistance. So once again, if you have been through a situation when you are rightfully felt wronged, accepting it is not the first thing that comes in mind, but it is a choice that you make for yourself and for your well-being. So tips that I can give you: number 1, be super benevolent with yourself. Accepting is not like a button you can press, and it's very difficult even for me to give you this in an exercise, because it's a process. But one thing I can tell you is that it is normal to have relapse. It is normal to have moments where you go back to why me, why me? But this is the kind of question that are completely useless, But what you can tell yourself is that every experiences that I go through are there and to heal something in me. And that's why I bring this in my life. That's why I attracted this situation in my life. And one exercise that I can give you, because you will experience relapse, and in those moments of relapse, of why me, of what if, you know, you have to have a posture of absolute benevolence, empathy, compassion, active listening, and a coach posture. And there's one exercise that I would like to give you that is quite amazing, because I've practiced this for myself. When you're facing a situation when there's a resistance to what is, there's basically something inside of you that is hurt and is trying to express itself. So here's an exercise that you can do. Take 2 chairs. In one chair, you're going to be the person who is hurt. On the other chair, you're going to be your 5 posture, which is the coach posture with benevolence, empathy, compassion, and active listening, okay? In one chair, you're expressing everything that you're feeling, that you resist about this experience, you know. And on the other chair, you stand up, you go on the other chair, and you're going to ask a question. Now, for me, I practiced this for a long time, so I don't need to go from one chair to another. But at the beginning, for you who never done that, it's very good, because it allows you to divide yourself in a certain way, you know, divide the situation, right? In this place, I can express my feelings, and on the other, I can question myself. And you know, I've done this, and it's quite amazing, because sometimes, you know, what becomes more hurtful is because we don't have a way or someone that we can express our feelings. And for me, when I express those things to myself, it makes me calm down. And once everything has been expressed, then I feel much better, and it's easier for me to see things in a more, I would say, outside way, you know, and not so emotional about things. And that is very empowering, okay? Forgiveness. Forgiveness is exactly, you know, forgiveness is like acceptance. It's not a natural state. Once again, always remember, forgiveness is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. So be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself, and be compassionate to yourself. And just as acceptance, you might experience relapse when it happens. Welcome them and use the chair exercise that I just gave you, where you express your grief. You know, you express it to yourself, right? Very often the reason things are getting bigger is because we can't express it. But, you know, the fact that you are taking this position of healer, of coach, of father, mother, friend, it's very empowering. I'm doing it all the time. I'm telling you, it's amazing. And sometimes, you know, once I was able to do my, you know, this part, you know, then I can go back to Sophia and I could be my coach, and I'd be like, okay, really? Is it really as bad as you thought it was? No, okay. And I think that's why I think this model is so amazing, you know. One of the signs that forgiveness has been fully done is that you are actually genuinely and honestly happy that this thing happened to you. Now, what I see sometimes is people going to say, oh, you know, I'm forgiven. I just forgiven. But, you know, every time you start to have this conversation, you can feel that there's a tension that is there, and they go back, yeah, but you know, there's this. When forgiveness have been completely done, I'm telling you, you are actually happy that you've been through this situation, because suddenly you're only connected to all the good things that it has bring you, and not so much to all the things that it has taken, right? Because remember, the reason we attract certain situation that keeps on hurting us is because life is telling us, listen, I'm hurt here and I need to heal. And this is, you know, there's 2 last things I want to say to you, and then this video is done for today. Number one of the biggest confusion that people have about emotional wound is that they think that is like the same as the wound that we have in our body. An emotional wound is not designed to heal itself. A physical wound, yes. If I cut myself, then my body is going to start to do all kind of work that I'm not aware to heal that wound. But an emotional wound, it is your job to heal. It is your decision to heal. It is your decision to accept it and to forgive it. It is a process, and it is an empowering process, because through that whole process that you're going through, you're learning. And this is how you can recycle negative experiences into powerful life lessons. Finally, this is the metaphor that this whole model is about, right? It is the rock, because at the beginning, an experience to me is like a piece of rock that you carry everywhere, and it's so heavy and it's so painful. And once you have been through the whole process, the rock becomes a feather. And a feather, you know, I inspire myself actually from the Native American, because for them, a feather meant that as a warrior, you have been through lots of war, and now you have gathered wisdom. And through this process, you gather also wisdom. I have to say, it's hard to look back at the life of Catherine and not be tempted to say, what if she would have done this or that? Things could have been so different for her. Mainly because her stubbornness has led not only to her punishment, but also the punishment of Mary, her only daughter, who will be known later on in history as Bloody Mary. Her life will be nothing else than the extension of the tragic ending of her own mother. Mostly because, and that is one of the important lessons that the OSFOUR Self Coaching Model is teaching us, is that whatever wound you don't heal, well, you automatically pass them on to the next generation. However, at the same time, it's also very easy to look at what Henry VIII has done and just think of him as the most horrible person in the whole world. But as we have seen while using the OSFOUR Self Coaching Model, is that in any situation, everyone has the reason. And therefore, if you really want to know why people do the things they do, well, first you need to understand those reasons. To ask yourself those simple questions will develop your ability to see different perspective and different point of view in the same situation, which will increase both your self-awareness, but also your communication skills. Yet at the end of the day, one has to remember that we all do the very best with what we have and what we can do. And everything that has happened to Catherine was perfect the way it was. On the next episode of this masterclass, we will explore in more detail the life of Henry VIII. But until then, guys, all I'm gonna say to you is peace, love, and light. Bye-bye.